This poor girl was forced by her billionaire father to leave with a stranger, but when she arrives at the man's house, he shows her something terrible that makes her cry immediately. Leave a comment and subscribe to support my work. The scent of fresh flowers permeated the air of the mansion as Nadia, with her small fingers, gently brushed the petals of the arrangement scattered throughout the living room. It was her daily ritual, one of the few moments of joy she found in that imposing and silent house. At 6 years old, she had already learned to move cautiously through the empty hallways, fearing to disturb the sacred silence that her father, Mr. Sterling, so prized. That morning, as on every other, she attentively watched the antique clock on the wall, awaiting the exact moment when her father would come down for breakfast. Mr. Sterling was a man of rigid habits, and Nadia knew that at 7 o'clock sharp he would appear, impeccably dressed in his dark suit. The housekeeper, Mrs. Eleanor, a grey-haired lady with a compassionate look, arranged the breakfast table with military precision. Each item had its specific place, exactly as Mr. Sterling demanded. Nadia already knew the routine. The newspaper, folded to the right of the plate, the porcelain cup aligned with the saucer, the white linen napkin perfectly ironed. "Sit up straight, dear," Mrs. Eleanor murmured, casting a worried glance towards the staircase. Nadia straightened her posture automatically, her small shoulders tense beneath the navy blue dress. The sound of her father's footsteps echoed through the hallway, making her heart race. Mr. Sterling entered the dining room with his usual austere expression. His eyes, normally cold and distant, seemed different that morning. There was something in them that Nadia couldn't decipher, a shadow, that frightened her more than the customary rigor. "Good morning, father," she said, her voice small and controlled as she had been taught. Mr. Sterling merely nodded, sitting at the head of the table. The heavy silence that followed was familiar, but there was something different in the air. Nadia could feel, even with her childish perception, that something was wrong. Her father barely touched his coffee, his fingers drumming restlessly on the mahogany table, a habit she had never noticed before. It was then that the doorbell rang, a strident sound that cut through the morning quiet like a knife. Mrs. Eleanor hurried towards the door, and Nadia noticed her father straightening in his chair, as if he were waiting for that moment. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, and an unknown man entered the dining room. He was tall, plain-looking, wearing worn clothes that contrasted drastically with the refined atmosphere of the mansion. His eyes were hard, and his calloused hands betrayed a life of hard work. "This is Travis," said Mr. Sterling, his voice hoarser than normal. "He's here to pick you up." Nadia felt the blood freeze in her veins. "Pick me up? Where to, father?" "You're going with him now," replied Mr. Sterling, avoiding her gaze. "Just take the essentials. Mrs. Eleanor has already packed a bag for you." Panic began to rise in Nadia's throat like bile. "But father, I don't want to go. Please, I promise to behave better. I promise to study harder. I promise—" "Enough!" Mr. Sterling's voice cut through the air like a whip. "You're going with Travis now. It's decided." Tears began to stream down Nadia's face as Mrs. Eleanor led her upstairs, her sobs echoing through the hallways of the mansion. The housekeeper tried to calm her, but her words sounded empty in the face of the terror that the girl felt. Minutes later, still crying, Nadia was practically dragged to an old car parked in front of the mansion. Travis opened the passenger door without saying a word, his face a mask of indifference. Through her tears, Nadia saw her father standing in the doorway of the mansion, his tall and imposing figure like a stone statue. There was no emotion on his face, no sign of regret or sadness, just that same strange shadow in his eyes, now deeper and more disturbing. The car began to move, and Nadia felt her world collapsing. Through the window, she saw her home, her father, her entire life being left behind. Despair consumed her as she questioned in her childish mind what she could have done so terribly wrong to deserve such punishment. Travis drove in silence, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror at the small figure huddled in the back seat. The elegant streets of the upscale neighborhood were left behind, giving way to increasingly simpler neighborhoods. Nadia's fear grew with each kilometer traveled, with each unfamiliar street they passed. Finally, the car stopped in front of a modest house, its peeling paint and unkempt garden a stark contrast to the mansion that Nadia had just left. Travis turned off the engine and turned to her. "We're here," he said, his rough voice breaking the silence for the first time. "This is your home now." The interior of Travis's house was as austere as its owner. The peeling walls displayed patches of dampness, and the few pieces of furniture seemed to have known better times. Nadia, still trembling with fear and confusion, clutched her small bag tightly as she observed the unfamiliar environment. "Your room is this way," said Travis, leading her down a narrow hallway. The door creaked open, revealing a tiny room with a single bed, an old wardrobe, and a simple bedside table. A single window let in the dim light of dusk, casting unsettling shadows on the peeling walls. Nadia hesitantly entered the room, her fine leather shoes making noise on the worn floorboards. The contrast with her old room in the mansion, decorated with pink wallpaper and delicate furniture, could not be greater. The tears, which had momentarily ceased due to the shock, returned in full force. "Why did my father send me away?" she asked between sobs, turning to Travis. "What did I do wrong?" Travis remained silent for a few moments, his face marked by a hard life softening almost imperceptibly. "You didn't do anything wrong, kid. Sometimes things are more complicated than they seem." But Nadia couldn't accept that vague explanation. Throughout her short life, she had strived to be the perfect daughter that her father demanded. She always kept her back straight, spoke softly, studied diligently, and never questioned the rigid rules imposed by Mr. Sterling. How could he simply send her away? The days that followed were a blur of sadness and loneliness. Nadia refused to eat, pushing away the simple plates that Travis prepared. Her nights were filled with nightmares and crying, her days with a heavy and painful silence. Travis, in turn, seemed to not know how to deal with a traumatized child. His clumsy attempts at comfort only made things worse. "You need to eat, kid," he would say, his gruff voice carrying a poorly disguised concern. "It won't do you any good to stay like this." A week passed, and the routine of the house began to settle into its own strangeness. Travis left early to work at his auto repair shop, leaving Nadia in the care of Mrs. Betty, an elderly neighbor who came to keep the girl company. The lady, with her simple and affectionate manner, tried to draw a few words from the little one, without success. It was on one of those silent afternoons that something changed. Nadia was sitting in the backyard, observing a small, neglected garden, when she heard a soft melody coming from the neighboring house. It was a familiar tune, a lullaby that her mother used to sing before passing away. The memory, so long buried, brought with it a new wave of pain. "Did your mother sing that song to you?" asked Mrs. Betty, who was watching the girl attentively. Surprised that Nadia had reacted to the sound, she continued, "You know, sometimes the people we love the most need to leave us, even if they don't want to." Those simple words touched something deep within Nadia. For the first time since arriving at that house, she truly looked at Mrs. Betty. "Why did he leave me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying so much. "I don't know, my little one," replied the lady, sitting down beside her. "But I know that your father must have his reasons. Sometimes adults do things that seem wrong, but they have their reasons." That night, when Travis came home from work, he found Nadia sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of untouched milk in front of her. He stopped at the door, observing the small, downcast figure, his grease-stained hands contrasting with the girl's delicacy. "Is my father sick?" asked Nadia suddenly, surprising Travis. "Is that why he sent me away?" The man froze. For a moment, his dark eyes meeting the girl's. There was something in his gaze, a hesitation that did not go unnoticed even by a 6-year-old. "Why do you think that?" he asked, avoiding a direct answer. "Because he was different that day," replied Nadia, her voice trembling slightly. His eyes were sad, like Mommy's before. Travis sat down heavily in a chair, the weight of some invisible knowledge bending his shoulders. "Nadia," he began, using her name for the first time since he'd picked her up. "There are things I can't tell you right now, but I need you to trust me." "How can I trust you?" she retorted, a spark of anger momentarily replacing the sadness. "You brought me away from home, away from my father." "I know you don't understand now," said Travis, his voice surprisingly soft, "but one day you will understand. Your father, he has his reasons." That night, lying in her narrow bed, Nadia thought about the words of Travis and Mrs. Betty. There was something that was not being said, a secret that hung in the air like a dark cloud. The girl hugged her only stuffed animal, a battered rabbit that she had managed to bring hidden in her bag, and cried silently. The days began to drag on with a new quality of pain. It was no longer just the sadness of abandonment, but a growing concern for her father. Every time Travis left for work, Nadia watched him with redoubled attention, trying to decipher on his face some sign, some clue about what was really happening. One morning, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Nadia woke up to the sound of raised voices coming from the kitchen. She approached the door silently, her heart beating fast, as she recognized one of the voices. It was Theodora, her aunt on her father's side, a woman who rarely visited them at the mansion. "Where is the girl, Travis?" demanded Theodora, her shrill voice filled with false concern. "How could Mr. Sterling leave her with someone like you? She needs to be with family." "You have nothing to do with this," replied Travis, his voice harder than Nadia had ever heard. "It was Mr. Sterling's decision, and that's how it's going to stay." "We'll see about that," threatened Theodora. "I won't allow a child of our family to be raised in a place like this. You have no idea what's coming, Travis." The sound of heels clicking on the wooden floor indicated that Theodora was leaving. Nadia ran back to her room, her mind spinning with new questions and fears. Why was her aunt there? Why did she seem so interested in her whereabouts now when she barely visited her before? Later that day, Nadia noticed that Travis was more tense than usual. He made several calls in a low voice, always looking over his shoulder to make sure she wasn't around. Something was wrong, very wrong, and the feeling of imminent danger began to grow in the girl's chest. The unexpected visit from Theodora triggered a series of events that would further transform Nadia's life. The next morning, Travis received a phone call that left him visibly disturbed. His hands trembled as he held the phone, and his face paled as he heard the news on the other end of the line. Nadia, who was playing quietly in the backyard under the supervision of Mrs. Betty, watched as Travis left hurriedly, without even saying goodbye. There was something different in his demeanor, an urgency that she had never seen before. The hours dragged on slowly that day. Mrs. Betty tried to distract Nadia with stories and games, but the girl remained restless. Her eyes constantly turned to the gate, waiting for Travis's return. The sun was already setting when he finally came back, carrying an even darker expression than before. "We need to talk, Nadia," he said, sitting down heavily in his old armchair. For the first time, Nadia noticed how tired he looked, as if he were carrying an immense weight on his shoulders. "Your father, he's in the hospital." Nadia's world seemed to stop for a moment. "Hospital?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is he sick? Is that why he sent me away?" Travis closed his eyes for an instant, as if seeking strength to continue. "Yes, kid, your father is very sick. He didn't want you to see him like that. He didn't want you to suffer seeing him wither away. Tears began to stream down Nadia's face, but this time they were different. They were no longer tears of abandonment and rejection, but of a deeper, more real pain. "I want to see him," she begged. "Please, Travis, take me to my father." "I can't." "Nadia," he replied, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. "Your father was very clear about that. He wants you safe, away from all this." "Away from what?" she asked, frustration and fear mixing in her childish voice. "What do I need to be? Safe from?" Before Travis could answer, they heard loud knocks on the door. He got up quickly, signaling for Nadia to remain silent. Through the crack in the window, they could see a luxurious car parked in front of the house. It was Theodora again, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a man in a suit, carrying a briefcase. "Open this door, Travis," she demanded, her shrill voice cutting through the night silence. "We have a court order." Travis quickly led Nadia to her room. "Stay here," he whispered, "and don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." The next few minutes were a whirlwind of raised voices and papers being shuffled. Nadia, hidden in her room, could hear fragments of the heated argument. "She's my niece," shouted Theodora. "How dare you prevent family from taking care of her? Mr. Sterling is dying, and you're keeping her hidden in this miserable place." "You have no idea what's going on?" retorted Travis, his voice controlled but firm. "Mr. Sterling entrusted the girl to me for a reason." "Reason?" Theodora laughed, bitterly. "The only reason I see is that my brother has lost his mind. A child of our social standing living in these conditions, it's absurd." The man in the suit interfered, his voice professional and cold. "Mr. Travis, we have here a temporary restraining order granting temporary custody of the minor to Miss Theodora, her aunt. You need to hand over the child. Immediately." Nadia felt her heart race. Hand over? They were going to take her away again. But what about her father? And why was Travis, who had once seemed so scary, now the only one trying to protect her? "This order is not valid," replied Travis, his voice trembling slightly. "I have documents signed by Mr. Sterling naming me Nadia's legal guardian." "Documents that were made when he was already sick," retorted Theodora. "He wasn't in a condition to make such important decisions. We're going to take this case to the bitter end, Travis. You don't have the resources to fight us." The sound of approaching footsteps made Nadia shrink even further into her corner. The bedroom door opened, revealing Theodora with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice falsely sweet, "come with your aunt. I'm going to take you to a much better place than this." Nadia looked at Travis, who was standing in the doorway with an expression of helplessness that she had never seen on his face. He seemed to be fighting an internal battle, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. "I don't want to go," said Nadia, her voice small but firm. "I want to stay here." "Don't be silly, girl," replied Theodora, her tone becoming harsher. "Look at this place. It's not suitable for someone from our family. I'm going to give you everything you deserve. Beautiful clothes, new toys, a decent home." "You never cared about me before," interrupted Nadia, surprising everyone with her perceptiveness. "Why now?" A flash of anger crossed Theodora's face, but she quickly masked it with another forced smile. "Because your father is sick, darling. It's our duty to take care of you now." The bailiff stepped forward. "I'm sorry, but we need to comply with the court order. The minor must accompany her aunt." Nadia began to cry silently as Theodora hurriedly gathered some of her clothes. Travis remained motionless, his hands clenched into fists, the helplessness and anger evident in every line of his face. "I'm going to get you back," he whispered when Theodora wasn't looking. "I promise." As she was being led to the luxurious car, Nadia looked one last time at the simple house that, in such a short time, had become her refuge. Travis was standing in the doorway, a lonely and defeated figure against the dark night. In the back seat of the car, next to her aunt, who spoke non-stop about how her life would change for the better, Nadia felt that she was being taken away, not only from Travis, but from something much more important. Something that her father had tried to protect at all costs. Theodora's mansion was as grand as it was cold. The antique and valuable furniture seemed more appropriate for a museum than for a house where a child should live. Nadia was installed in a spacious room on the second floor, decorated with expensive furniture and new toys that remained untouched. The first night was the most difficult. Lying in a bed that was too big, Nadia hugged her stuffed rabbit, the only familiar object she had managed to bring with her. The sounds of the house were different, frightening. The tick-tock of the antique clock in the hallway echoed like a dark omen. "You need to eat properly," said Theodora during breakfast, watching with disapproval when Nadia only poked at the food. "And we're going to have to do something about those manners of yours. You can't keep acting like like someone who lived in that place." Theodora's words always came laden with venom, disguised as honey. Every comment about Travis's house, every veiled criticism of the way he had cared for her, made Nadia's heart clench. As simple as life with Travis was, there was a sincerity there that was completely lacking in Theodora's mansion. The days dragged on in a suffocating routine. Theodora insisted on refining Nadia's manners, hiring private tutors for etiquette and piano. The girl was forced to spend hours practicing posture, learning which cutlery to use on each occasion, how to behave at social events. "Your mother would be ashamed if she saw you like this," said Theodora when Nadia made a mistake. "She who was so refined, so elegant, how did Mr. Sterling allow you to turn into this?" The mentions of her mother were like stabs in Nadia's chest. The memories she had of her were few and precious, and hearing Theodora use her name as a weapon hurt deeply. A week passed without news from Travis or her father. Every time Nadia asked about Mr. Sterling, Theodora changed the subject or answered with irritating vagueness. "He's receiving the best care, darling. Don't worry about that now." It was during one of these seemingly endless days that Nadia met Regina, the cook of the house. Unlike the other employees, who maintained a respectful distance following Theodora's orders, Regina showed a genuine kindness to the girl. "You remind me of my daughter when she was little," said Regina one afternoon while preparing dinner. Nadia had found refuge in the kitchen, escaping the endless etiquette lessons. She also had that sad look, as if she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. Regina allowed Nadia to stay in the kitchen, away from Theodora's critical eyes. There, the girl could simply be herself, without having to maintain perfect posture or worry about which fork to use. It was Regina who, on a particularly difficult night, found Nadia crying hidden in the pantry. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked, sitting down beside the girl on the floor. "I want to see my father," Nadia sobbed. "I want to know if he's okay. Aunt Theodora doesn't tell me anything. She doesn't let me talk to anyone." Regina hesitated for a moment, glancing cautiously towards the door. "Listen, honey," she whispered. "I shouldn't tell you this, but I overheard your aunt on the phone earlier today. Your father is not doing well at all. The doctors—" Before Regina could finish, they heard footsteps approaching. It was Theodora, who entered the kitchen with her usual expression of displeasure. "What are you doing here, Nadia?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Haven't I told you that it's not appropriate for someone of your position to be in the kitchen? Go to your room immediately." That night, Nadia couldn't sleep. Regina's interrupted. Words echoed in her mind. Was her father worse? Why couldn't she see him? Why wouldn't anyone tell her the truth? Determined to find out more, Nadia began to pay closer attention to Theodora's conversations. She started sneaking through the hallways, listening to phone calls and discussions through half-open doors. It was like that when, one Sunday morning, she heard something that chilled her blood. Theodora was in her study, speaking on the phone in a low voice, but clear enough for Nadia, hidden behind the door, to hear. "Yes, the lawyers are already taking care of everything," she was saying. "As soon as Mr. Sterling, well, you know, all the fortune will pass to me as Nadia's legal guardian. That idiot mechanic doesn't have a chance of proving he has any rights over her." Nadia felt her heart race. So that was it. Her aunt only wanted her father's money. That's why she was keeping her trapped in that house, away from everyone. "The doctor said it's a matter of days," continued Theodora. "Mr. Sterling is getting weaker and weaker. Soon we won't have to worry about him or that Travis guy anymore." Tears began to stream down Nadia's face. Her father was dying, and she was there, trapped in that cold house, prevented from saying goodbye to him. Anger and despair grew in her chest, mixing into a determination that she had never felt before. That same night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Nadia tried to use the kitchen phone to call Travis. Her small hands trembled as she dialed the number she had memorized, but before she could complete the call, a voice made her freeze. "What do you think you're doing?" asked Theodora, standing in the kitchen doorway in her silk robe. Her eyes gleamed with a contained fury. "I want to talk to my father," replied Nadia, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear. "I know he's very sick. Please, Aunt, let me see him." "You're not going anywhere," snapped Theodora, snatching the phone from Nadia's hands. "And to make sure you don't try any more funny business, I'm going to have to take some precautions." The next day, bars were installed on the windows of Nadia's room, and a governess was assigned to watch her 24 hours a day. Regina was fired without explanation, leaving Nadia even more alone in that hostile environment. At night, lying in her bed, Nadia looked at the bars on her window and thought about her father, alone in some hospital bed. She thought about Travis, who had promised to get her back. And for the first time since arriving at that house, she felt something beyond fear and sadness, a fierce determination to find a way to escape, to get to her father before it was too late. The governess, hired by Theodora, a tall and thin woman named Margaret, followed Nadia like a relentless shadow. Her small and attentive eyes didn't miss a single movement of the girl, making any attempt at communication with the outside world. Impossible. Even trips to the bathroom were monitored, with Margaret waiting outside the door. In her guarded solitude, Nadia began to notice small details that had previously gone unnoticed. The constant coming and going of men in suits who met with Theodora in the study, the whispered conversations that ceased abruptly when she approached, the late-night phone calls that her aunt received, always speaking in a low and tense voice. On one of those nights, while pretending to sleep, Nadia heard a particularly heated argument coming from downstairs. Theodora's voice, normally controlled, was raised. "I don't care what you have to do," she yelled. "That filthy mechanic is causing too many problems. He has documents that could ruin everything. We need to act before it's too late." Nadia's heart raced as she realized they were talking about Travis. What was her aunt planning? What documents were these that seemed to worry her so much? The next morning, during breakfast, Theodora seemed strangely agitated. Her fingers drummed nervously on the table while she read the newspaper, a habit that painfully reminded Nadia of Mr. Sterling on the last day she had seen him. "Aunt," Nadia ventured, gathering all her courage, "why did Father choose Travis to take care of me?" The newspaper lowered abruptly, revealing Theodora's pale face. "Don't utter that man's name in this house," she hissed. "Your father wasn't in his right mind when he made that absurd decision. But don't worry, dear. Soon everything will be resolved." There was something in Theodora's tone that made Nadia shudder. The calculated coldness in her eyes, the smile that didn't reach her gaze, all indicated that something terrible was about to happen. It was that same afternoon that Nadia found an unexpected ally. Maria, the new maid who had replaced Regina, was young and seemingly shy. Theodora barely glanced at her, considering her too insignificant to pose any threat. But Maria had attentive eyes and a kind heart. She noticed Nadia's silent suffering and little by little began to exchange small gestures of affection with the girl. A smile here, a discreet caress there, always when Margaret wasn't looking. "Your friend hasn't given up on you," Maria whispered one day while pretending to tidy Nadia's room. "The man from the auto shop, he comes to the gate every day trying to get news of you." Nadia felt her heart leap. Travis hadn't forgotten her. He was still trying to reach her, even with all the obstacles that Theodora put in his way. "He asks about your father too," continued Maria, her voice almost inaudible. "It seems he managed to find out which hospital he's in." That night, while trying to sleep, Nadia heard another disturbing conversation. Theodora was talking on the phone in her study, her voice filled with urgency. "His condition is deteriorating rapidly," she was saying. "The doctors don't give him more than a few days. We need to make sure that mechanic doesn't get near the hospital. If Mr. Sterling manages to talk to him..." The sentence hung in the air, but its meaning was crystal clear to Nadia. Her father was dying, and Theodora was doing everything she could to keep Travis away from him. But why? What could her father say to Travis that her aunt feared so much? The next day, Maria managed to discreetly pass a note to Nadia. On it, there was an address written hastily. It was the hospital where Mr. Sterling was hospitalized. The girl's heart leaped as she read the words, but how could she get there? The bars on her window, Margaret's constant surveillance, Theodora's watchful eyes. Everything seemed like an impossible prison to escape. It was then that something unexpected happened. During dinner, Theodora received a phone call that left her visibly disturbed. "What do you mean he's there?" she shouted into the phone. "Keep him away from the room. I'm coming there right now." In her haste to leave, Theodora made a mistake. She left her purse on the living room table, and inside it, Nadia could clearly see, was a set of keys. Margaret, who normally didn't leave Nadia's side, was called by Theodora to receive instructions. The governess followed her employer to the door, leaving Nadia alone for a few precious minutes. The girl didn't waste time. With her heart beating so hard it felt like it was going to explode, she quietly approached Theodora's purse. Her small hands trembled as she grabbed the set of keys, quickly hiding them in the pocket of her dress. "I'll be back soon," said Theodora, already at the door. "Don't let the girl out of the room under any circumstances. Understood?" Margaret nodded rigidly, turning her attention back to Nadia. "Time for bed, girl," she said, her tone brooking no argument. Nadia obeyed without protest, going up the stairs with apparent docility. In her room, she lay down still dressed, the set of keys weighing in her pocket like a promise of freedom. Hours passed. The house plunged into nocturnal silence, broken only by Margaret's soft snoring, who was sleeping in an armchair near the bedroom door. The moonlight entered through the bars of the window, projecting shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. With her heart pounding, Nadia got up silently from her bed. Years of living with a strict father had taught her to move without making noise. She approached the door, the keys firmly held in her small hand. The first key didn't work. Neither did the second. On the third attempt, the soft click of the lock sounding like thunder in her ears, the door finally opened. Nadia held her breath looking at Margaret, but the governess continued to sleep soundly. With steps as light as feathers, Nadia slipped out of the room. The dark hallway seemed endless, each shadow a threat, each creak of the floor a possible denunciation of her escape. Reaching the stairs, she stopped, her heart almost jumping out of her mouth. Voices. There were voices coming from downstairs. Had Theodora returned? No, the voices were different, masculine. The men in suits who always visited her aunt were there, talking in urgent tones. "Theodora is at the hospital," said one of them. "The mechanic managed to get in. If he talks to Mr. Sterling before..." "He won't talk," cut in another. "Our men are there. He won't get near the room." Nadia felt a shiver of fear run down her spine. Travis was at the hospital. He was trying to get to her father, just as she needed to do. But how to get out of the house without being seen? How to get to the hospital? It was then that she remembered. Maria, the young maid, slept in a small room in the back of the house. If she could get there. With her heart in her throat, Nadia went down the steps, one by one, clinging to the wall to prevent the old wood from creaking under her feet. The voices of the men continued to come from the library, allowing her to move stealthily towards the kitchen. The door that led to the back of the house was locked, but Nadia already had the keys. Her small hands trembled so much that she could barely fit them into the lock. After several agonizing attempts, she finally managed to open the door. The cold night air greeted her like a slap. Barefoot so as not to make noise, Nadia ran across the wet lawn to the small building where Maria's room was located. She knocked lightly on the window, praying that the maid was still awake. Maria opened the window almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for her. Her eyes widened as she saw Nadia trembling with cold and fear. "For goodness sake, child," she whispered, helping Nadia inside. "How did you manage to get out?" "Maria, I need your help," Nadia pleaded, her words coming out between teeth that were chattering with cold. "I need to get to the hospital. My father, Travis, is there. Please." Maria hesitated for only a second before starting to act. Quickly she grabbed her coat and wrapped it around Nadia, as well as a pair of slippers that, although too big, would serve to protect her feet. "I'm going to take you," she said, determined. "I know where the hospital is, but we need to be quick before they realize you're missing." The two left through the back of the property, where there was a small service door that Maria used to go to and from work. The maid's old car was parked on the side street. During the drive to the hospital, Nadia barely breathed. Each red light seemed like an eternity, each curve an unnecessary detour. Maria drove as fast as she could, aware of the precious time that was running against them. "Travis has been coming every day," explained Maria as she drove. "Your aunt put security guards to stop him from entering, but today he succeeded. That's why she left in such a hurry." Finally, they arrived at the hospital. The stark white building rose against the night sky like a fortress. At the entrance to the emergency room, Nadia recognized Theodora's car. "She's here," Nadia whispered, the fear tightening her chest. "Let's go through the employee's entrance," decided Maria. "I know a nurse who works here. She can help us." They entered through a side door, Maria guiding Nadia through less crowded hallways. The nurse friend, Carmen, was at the nursing station on the 3rd floor. "Room 307, Carmen informed after quickly hearing the situation. "But there's a commotion there. The patient's sister is making a scene with a man who tried to enter." Nadia didn't wait to hear more. Letting go of Maria's hand, she ran down the hallway towards the indicated room. From afar, she could hear Theodora's shrill voice. "You have no right to be here," she was shouting. "I'm going to call security. He asked me to come," replied the familiar voice of Travis, firm despite the evident exhaustion. "There's something he needs to tell me." Nadia turned the last corner in time to see Theodora pushing Travis away from the room door. Two men in suits were approaching quickly, probably the security guards hired by her aunt. "Father!" cried Nadia, her voice echoing through the silent hallway. Everyone turned to her. Theodora paled, Travis flashed a relieved smile, and the security guards stopped, confused by the girl's unexpected presence. "Nadia," came a weak voice from inside the room. "Is that you, my daughter?" The voice of her father, although faint, was like a magnet. Nadia ran, passing by everyone before they could react, and entered the room. Mr. Sterling was lying in the hospital bed, his face pale and thin, almost unrecognizable. But his eyes, upon meeting his daughter's, shone with the same intensity as always. "Father!" Nadia ran to the bed, tears running freely down her face. "My little one," whispered Mr. Sterling, his hand trembling as he touched his daughter's face. Forgive me for pushing you away like that. Mr. Sterling! Theodora entered the room like a hurricane. She shouldn't be here. I'm taking her back right now. No! Mr. Sterling's voice, although weak, carried an authority that made Theodora freeze. Travis, come in. I need everyone to hear what I have to say. Travis entered the room, standing protectively beside Nadia. Maria appeared at the door but stayed outside watching. Theodora, began Mr. Sterling, his breathing labored. I know what you're trying to do. Your lawyers have been scouring my documents, looking for a way to invalidate my decision about Nadia's guardianship. Brother, you're not in a condition to— Silence, cut in Mr. Sterling. Travis, in the pocket of my coat, which is in that closet, there's a letter. Please. Travis quickly located the coat and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Mr. Sterling motioned for him to open it. This is my last statement, said Mr. Sterling, his voice gaining strength. In it, I explain exactly why I chose Travis to take care of Nadia. He's the only one I can trust. But why? Asked Nadia, her small voice filled with curiosity. Mr. Sterling closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. Because Travis is the only one who hasn't changed his character over the years. When we were young, he saved my life in an accident. He never asked for anything in return, never used it to take advantage. Even when I became rich, he continued his simple, honest life. That accident? Interrupted Theodora, her voice trembling. But you said you had been helped by a stranger. Because he asked not to be identified, replied Mr. Sterling. He didn't want recognition. He didn't want a reward. For years, I kept in touch with him discreetly, watching how he lived. And when I learned of my illness, I knew that he was the one who could protect you, Nadia, not for the money, but for the character. Nadia looked at Travis, seeing him in a new light. The rustic man who had scared her so much at the beginning now seemed different. His calloused hands, his simple manner, all of that was part of who he really was. Someone that her father had handpicked to protect her. The letter, continued Mr. Sterling, explains all of this, and more. It reveals how you, Theodora, have been trying to manipulate the situation since you learned of my illness. The lawyers, the threats to Travis, your attempts to invalidate my decision, everything is documented. Theodora staggered, leaning against the wall. Her face was livid. I'm not going to report you, said Mr. Sterling, his voice softening. You're my sister despite everything, but you're going to leave Nadia alone. She will stay with Travis, as I planned. At that moment, something changed in the room. The tension that hung in the air seemed to dissipate, replaced by a different calm. Nadia, still holding her father's hand, felt as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Father, she whispered, I'm going to stay with you now. Yes, my little one, replied Mr. Sterling, a faint smile on his lips. For all the time that I have left. In the weeks that followed, Nadia divided her time between the hospital and Travis's house, which now no longer seemed so modest to her eyes. Theodora disappeared from their lives, taking with her her ambitions and threats. Mr. Sterling lived for another 2 months, enough time to see his daughter flourishing under Travis's care, enough time to share with her stories about her mother, about his life, about the choices he had made. When he finally passed away, on a quiet autumn afternoon, Nadia was by his side, holding his hand. There was no more fear, there were no more doubts. She knew exactly where she belonged. Years later, Nadia would fully understand the wisdom behind her father's choice. Travis not only protected and educated her, but taught her the value of simplicity, honesty, and true love. The fortune that her father had left remained intact until she came of age, not because Travis was an excellent administrator, but because he never cared about it. The modest house where they lived became a true home, full of laughter and love, exactly as Mr. Sterling had planned for. His daughter, And Nadia, growing up among the tools of the auto shop and the books that Travis encouraged her to read, became exactly what her father had always dreamed. A person of character, who valued not what people possessed, but who they really were.